The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross, but Eric Patel could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing against his chest like a physical force. Nathan Hall sat across from him on the worn leather couch, his fingers absently tracing patterns on his phone screen. And Eric wondered if his best friend had any idea that those simple text messages had been slowly unraveling everything Eric thought he knew about himself. It had started so innocently. Good morning texts that arrived before Eric's alarm clock. Random photos of coffee cups and sunsets with messages like, "Thought you'd like this," attached. Most telling of all, those good night messages that came without fail, every single night for the past 3 months, each one a small anchor that kept Eric tethered to something he couldn't quite name, but desperately wanted to understand. Nathan looked up from his phone, catching Eric staring, and offered that easy smile that had been Eric's undoing since they'd met in college 5 years ago. "You're being weird tonight," Nathan said, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that made Eric's chest tighten. "Everything okay?" Eric forced a laugh, running his hands through his dark hair in a gesture Nathan had seen countless times before. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but the truth felt too dangerous to voice. How could he explain that he'd been cataloging every interaction between them, searching for signs that maybe, just maybe, Nathan's behavior meant something more than simple friendship? "You've been saying that a lot lately," Nathan observed, setting his phone aside and giving Eric his full attention. The weight of that focused gaze made Eric's heart race in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. "Talk to me, man. What's really going on? Before we see how this ends, tell us where you're watching from and hype this video in the comments. This story is about to get intense, and we want to hear from all of you about how these kinds of friendships can completely change everything you thought you knew about yourself." Eric opened his mouth to deflect again, to make another joke or change the subject entirely, but something in Nathan's expression stopped him. There was a softness there, a vulnerability that Eric had been noticing more and more frequently in recent weeks. It was the same look Nathan got when he talked about feeling disconnected from his girlfriend, Sandra Cuevas, the same expression that crossed his face when he mentioned feeling like something was missing from his life. "Nathan," Eric began, then stopped, the words catching in his throat like they were too big to fit through the narrow space between his fear and his hope. But to understand how they had arrived at this moment, sitting in the lamplight of Eric's apartment with the weight of 3 months of increasingly intimate communication hanging between them, it was necessary to go back to the beginning, back to when Nathan had first started texting Eric with a frequency and attention that felt different from their usual casual friendship. It had been a Tuesday morning in early spring when Eric's phone buzzed with the first message that would change everything. "Hope you slept well. Coffee shop on 5th has a new blend that made me think of you." Eric had stared at the text for a full minute, trying to parse the meaning behind those simple words. Nathan had never texted him about coffee before, had never mentioned thinking about him in casual moments throughout the day. Eric had responded with something equally casual, but as the days passed, the messages became more frequent, more personal. Nathan would send photos of books he was reading, asking for Eric's opinion on passages that resonated with him. He'd share random observations about his day, moments that felt too small and intimate to share with just anyone. The shift had been so gradual that Eric almost missed it at first. Nathan had always been friendly, had always been the kind of person who drew others into his orbit with natural charisma and genuine interest in their lives. But this felt different. This felt intentional in a way that made Eric's pulse quicken every time his phone lit up with Nathan's name. The goodnight messages had started about 2 weeks into this new pattern of communication. Simple at first, just "sleep well," or "good night, Eric," but they evolved into something more substantial. Nathan would share thoughts about his day, reflections on conversations they'd had, questions about Eric's plans for tomorrow. Each message felt like a small gift, a piece of Nathan's inner world offered freely and without expectation. Eric found himself staying awake later and later, waiting for those messages, crafting his responses with care that bordered on obsession. He would type and delete, trying to find the perfect balance between friendly and something else, something that might hint at the growing feelings he was desperately trying to suppress. The most dangerous part was how natural it all felt, how easy it became to fall into this rhythm of constant communication, This sense of being the first person Nathan thought of in the morning and the last person he spoke to at night. Eric began to feel like he was living two lives. One where he was Nathan's best friend, who listened patiently to complaints about Sandra and offered advice about their relationship troubles, and another where he was the recipient of Nathan's most private thoughts and observations. 3 weeks into this new dynamic, Nathan had shown up at Eric's apartment unannounced, looking disheveled and upset in a way Eric had rarely seen. Sandra had canceled their weekend plans again, choosing to spend time with her work friends instead, and Nathan seemed genuinely bewildered by his own reaction to her absence. "I should be relieved," Nathan had said, pacing around Eric's living room, with restless energy. "I should be happy to have the weekend to myself, right? But instead, I just feel empty, like there's this space inside me that nothing seems to fill." Eric had made coffee and listened, offering the kind of supportive friendship he'd always provided. But something about Nathan's vulnerability that day had shifted the atmosphere between them. When Nathan finally sat down on the couch beside Eric, he'd sat closer than usual, close enough that Eric could smell his cologne and feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "You know what's weird?" Nathan had said, his voice dropping to something softer, more contemplative. "The person I most wanted to talk to about all this was you. Not Sandra, not my family, not any of my other friends, just you." The admission had hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that neither of them seemed ready to address directly. Eric had felt his heart hammering against his ribs, felt the familiar ache of wanting something he couldn't have. But there had been something else there too, a flicker of possibility that he'd been afraid to acknowledge. That night, Nathan's goodnight message had been different. "Thanks for listening today. I don't know what I'd do without you in my life. You make everything make sense somehow." Eric had stared at those words until his eyes burned, reading and rereading them, searching for hidden meanings and finding hope in places where logic told him there was none. The pattern continued and intensified over the following weeks. Nathan would text Eric about everything and nothing, sharing photos of sunsets with messages about how the colors reminded him of Eric's eyes, sending links to songs that made him think of their college days, asking Eric's opinion on decisions both large and small. Eric began to notice changes in Nathan's behavior during their in-person interactions too. Nathan would stand closer when they talked, would let his hand linger on Eric's shoulder or arm during casual touches that felt anything but casual. He started suggesting activities that felt more like dates than hangouts, quiet dinners or at intimate restaurants, long walks through the city where they talked about everything except the growing tension between them. The breaking point had come on a Friday night 3 weeks ago. Nathan had arrived at Eric's apartment looking frustrated and confused, having just come from another disappointing evening with Sandra. She'd spent the entire dinner on her phone, had shown no interest in the book Nathan was excited about, had dismissed his suggestion that they plan a weekend trip together. "I keep trying to connect with her," Nathan had said, accepting the glass of wine Eric offered him. "I keep thinking that if I just try harder, if I just find the right way to communicate, we'll have what I know we should have. But it's like we're speaking different languages." They'd ended up on Eric's couch, the bottle of wine between them, talking about relationships and connection and what it meant to truly know another person. Nathan had been unusually philosophical that night, asking questions that felt loaded with personal significance. "Do you think it's possible to love someone and still feel lonely when you're with them?" Nathan had asked, his eyes focused on the wine in his glass rather than on Eric's face. "I think," Eric had said carefully, "that sometimes we try to force connections that aren't naturally there. Sometimes we think we should feel something because it makes sense on paper. But real connection doesn't always follow logical rules." Nathan had looked up at him then, and Eric had seen something vulnerable and searching in his expression. "What does real connection feel like to you?" The question had felt like a test, like Nathan was asking for something specific without being able to voice it directly. Eric had chosen his words carefully, describing connection as ease and understanding, as the feeling of being seen and accepted completely, as the desire to share both the mundane and meaningful moments of life with another person. "It sounds like you're describing friendship," Nathan had said, but his tone suggested he was grappling with something more complex than the simple definition implied. Maybe the best relationships are built on friendship, Eric had replied. Maybe romantic love without that foundation is just attraction and habit. They talked until nearly 3 in the morning, the conversation weaving through topics both personal and philosophical. When Nathan finally left, he'd hugged Eric goodbye with an intensity that felt different from their usual casual embraces. He'd held on longer, had pressed his face against Eric's neck for just a moment, and Eric had felt Nathan's breath against his skin like a whispered secret. The goodnight text that arrived 20 minutes after Nathan left had been the most revealing yet. I've been thinking about what you said about connection, and I think you might be the only person who really understands me. That scares me and comforts me at the same time. Eric had stared at that message for hours, turning it over in his mind, analyzing every word choice and punctuation mark. The admission felt like a door opening, but Eric wasn't sure if Nathan even realized he'd opened it. Wasn't sure if he was reading too much into words that might have been meant platonically. The weeks that followed had been a careful dance of advance and retreat. Nathan would send messages that felt charged with meaning, would suggest activities that blurred the line between friendship and something more, would touch Eric in ways that felt intentional and significant. But then he would pull back, would mention Sandra or make comments that reinforced the boundaries of their friendship, leaving Eric feeling whiplashed and uncertain. Eric found himself analyzing every interaction with the intensity of a scholar studying ancient texts. When Nathan texted him photos of his morning coffee with messages like, "Wish you were here to share this with me," was that friendly affection or something deeper? When Nathan suggested they spend an entire Saturday together, just the two of them, exploring bookstores and trying new restaurants, was that a date or just two friends hanging out? The ambiguity was both thrilling and torturous. Eric felt like he was living in a constant state of heightened awareness, every nerve ending tuned to Nathan's presence and attention. He began to notice things he'd never paid attention to before. The way Nathan's eyes would linger on his face during conversations, the way Nathan seemed to find excuses to be physically close to him, the way Nathan's voice would soften when he said Eric's name. 2 weeks ago, the dynamic had shifted again. Nathan had broken up with Sandra, a decision that seemed to surprise him as much as it relieved him. He'd called Eric immediately afterward, his voice shaking with adrenaline and uncertainty. "I did it," Nathan had said without preamble when Eric answered the phone. "I ended things with Sandra." Eric had felt his heart stop and restart in the space of a single breath. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," Nathan had said, and Eric could hear the wonder in his voice. "I feel like I can breathe again, like I've been holding my breath for months and finally remembered how to exhale." They talked for 2 hours that night, Nathan processing his decision and Eric offering support while trying to manage his own complicated feelings about the breakup. Part of him was elated that Nathan was free from a relationship that clearly wasn't fulfilling him, but another part was terrified about what this might mean for their friendship. Nathan's behavior in the days following the breakup had been different, more focused somehow, more intentional. His text messages became even more frequent and personal, his suggestions for spending time together more specific and intimate. He'd started calling instead of just texting, long conversations that stretched late into the night, covering everything from childhood memories to future dreams. Last weekend, Nathan had suggested they'd take a day trip to the coast, just the two of them. They'd spent the day walking along the beach, talking and laughing, sharing food at a small seaside restaurant, watching the sunset from a quiet stretch of sand. It had felt like the most natural thing in the world, and also like the most significant day of Eric's life. During the drive home, Nathan had reached over and taken Eric's hand, linking their fingers together in a gesture that felt both casual and monumental. He'd held on for the entire hour-long drive, their joined hands resting on the center console, and Eric had felt like his entire world had tilted on its axis. "Thank you," Nathan had said as they sat in Eric's driveway, neither of them making a move to get out of the car. "So, today for everything. I don't think I've ever felt this comfortable with another person." Eric had looked over at him, taking in the soft expression on Nathan's face, the way the setting sun cast golden light across his features, and had felt something shift inside his chest. "Nathan," he'd started to say, But Nathan had squeezed his hand gently, cutting him off. I know, Nathan had said quietly. I feel it too. They'd sat in silence for another few minutes, hands still linked, both of them seeming to understand that they were standing at the edge of something that would change everything between them. Finally, Nathan had released Eric's hand and gotten out of the car, but not before leaning over to press a soft kiss to Eric's cheek. Good night, Eric, he'd said, his voice barely above a whisper. The goodnight text that arrived an hour later had been simple but loaded with meaning. Today was perfect. You're perfect. I'm scared of what that means, but I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel it. Eric had read that message dozens of times over the past week, each reading revealing new layers of meaning and possibility. Nathan was scared, but he was also acknowledging that there was something between them that went beyond friendship. He couldn't pretend anymore, which implied that he had been pretending, had been suppressing feelings that mirrored Eric's own. The week since that day trip had been a study in careful navigation. Nathan continued to text Eric constantly, but there was a new quality to their communication, a sense of anticipation and nervousness that hadn't been there before. They'd seen each other twice during the week, casual meetings that felt charged with unspoken possibilities. Yesterday, Nathan had called Eric in the middle of the afternoon, his voice tight with an emotion Eric couldn't immediately identify. Can I ask you something? Nathan had said without his usual greeting. Of course. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to kiss someone you weren't supposed to kiss? The question had hit Eric like a physical blow, stealing his breath and making his hands shake. What do you mean? I mean, Nathan had said, his voice dropping to something softer, more vulnerable. Have you ever found yourself thinking about kissing a friend, someone who's supposed to be off limits, and wondering if it would change everything, or if it would just make everything make sense? Eric had closed his eyes, gripping the phone tighter, feeling like Nathan was asking him to step off a cliff without knowing if there would be solid ground below. Nathan, why are you asking me this? Because I can't stop thinking about it, Nathan had admitted. I can't stop thinking about you. The admission had hung between them through the phone line, heavy with implications and possibilities. Eric had felt his heart hammering against his ribs, felt the familiar ache of wanting something that might finally be within reach. I think about you, too, Eric had whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating to finally voice. Can I see you tonight? Nathan had asked. I think we need to talk about this in person. Which brought them to this moment, sitting in Eric's living room with the weight of their mutual confession, creating a tension that felt almost electric. Nathan had been quiet since arriving, seeming to gather his courage for a conversation that would either destroy their friendship or transform it into something entirely different. Eric, Nathan said now, his voice carrying a tremor that Eric had never heard before. I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get through it before you say anything, okay? Eric nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. Nathan took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. I've been lying to myself for months, maybe years. I kept telling myself that what I felt for you was just friendship, just appreciation for having someone who understood me so completely. But the truth is, you're the first person I think about when I wake up, and the last person I think about before I fall asleep. You're the person I want to share good news with, the person I turn to when I'm confused or scared or happy. Eric felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, overwhelmed by the honesty in Nathan's voice. When I was with Sandra, I kept comparing everything to what I had with you, Nathan continued. The way you listen when I talk, the way you remember details about things I care about, the way being around you feels like coming home. I kept thinking that's what friendship was supposed to feel like. But I was wrong. This isn't friendship, Eric. This is love. The word hung in the air between them like a bridge finally completed, spanning the distance that had kept them apart for so long. Eric felt something break open in his chest. A flood of relief and joy and terror were all mixed together. I love you, Nathan said again, his voice stronger now, more certain. I'm in love with you, and I think I have been for a long time. I just didn't know how to recognize it. Didn't know it was possible to fall in love with your best friend. Eric stood up abruptly, crossing the small space between them in two quick strides. Nathan looked up at him with wide eyes, vulnerability written across every line of his face. Nathan, Eric said, his voice rough with emotion. I've been in love with you for 2 years. Every text message, every phone call, every moment we've spent together. I've been trying not to hope for exactly this. Nathan's face crumpled with relief, and he reached up to take Eric's hands, pulling him down onto the couch beside him. Really? Really, Eric confirmed, squeezing Nathan's hands. I thought I was going crazy, reading too much into everything, wanting something that could never happen. God, we're idiots, Nathan said, laughing shakily. All this time, we were both too scared to say what we were feeling. I was terrified of losing you, Eric admitted. I'd rather have you as a friend than not have you at all. You're never going to lose me, Nathan said fiercely. Never. I promise you that. They sat in silence for a moment, hands linked, both of them processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Eric felt like his entire world had been rearranged, like everything that had felt uncertain and painful was suddenly clear and right. Can I ask you something now? Eric said. Anything. When you were texting me all those good morning and good night messages, did you know what you were doing? Nathan smiled, a soft expression that transformed his entire face. Not consciously, but looking back, I think part of me did. I think I was trying to make sure I was part of your day, that I had a place in your morning and evening routines. I wanted to be important to you. You were always important to me, Eric said. You are important to me. I know that now, Nathan said. I think I was just scared that if I acknowledged what I was feeling, it would ruin everything between us. And now, Basim? Eric asked. Nathan looked at him with an expression so tender it made Eric's chest ache. Now I think this is the most right thing I've ever felt in my life. Eric felt his breath catch, overwhelmed by the sincerity in Nathan's voice. Nathan, can I kiss you? The question seemed to surprise Nathan, his eyes widening slightly before a smile spread across his face. I was hoping you would ask that. Eric leaned forward slowly, giving Nathan time to change his mind. But Nathan met him halfway, their lips connecting in a kiss that felt like coming home and setting off fireworks at the same time. It was soft at first, tentative, both of them marveling at the reality of finally being able to touch each other this way. But as the initial shock wore off, the kiss deepened, became more urgent, more certain. Eric felt Nathan's hands tangle in his hair, felt Nathan's body press closer against his own, and thought dimly that nothing had ever felt more natural or more perfect than this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Nathan rested his forehead against Eric's, his eyes still closed. Wow, Nathan whispered. Yeah, Eric agreed, his voice equally soft. Wow. They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, both of them seeming to absorb the reality of what had just happened. So what happens now? Nathan asked eventually, opening his eyes to meet Eric's gaze. Now we figure it out, Eric said. Together, one day at a time. Nathan smiled, the expression bright and hopeful. I like the sound of that. Are you scared? Eric asked, needing to know that he wasn't alone and feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of this change. Terrified, Nathan admitted, but also happier than I've ever been. Is that weird? If it is, then we're both weird, Eric said, pressing a soft kiss to Nathan's lips. Because that's exactly how I feel too. They spent the rest of the evening talking, processing the shift in their relationship, sharing stories and feelings they'd been holding back for months. Nathan told Eric about the moment he'd first realized his feelings might be more than friendship. A random Tuesday when Eric had laughed at something Nathan said, and Nathan had felt his heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with friendship. Eric shared his own moment of realization. A night months ago when Nathan had fallen asleep on Eric's couch during a movie, and Eric had spent an hour just watching him sleep, feeling protective and tender and completely in love. I kept all your goodnight messages, Eric admitted, as they lay together on the couch, Nathan's head on Eric's chest. I have screenshots of every single one. Nathan laughed, the sound vibrating against Eric's chest. That's embarrassing and adorable at the same time. I was trying to convince myself they didn't mean anything special, Eric said, running his fingers through Nathan's hair. But I couldn't bring myself to delete them. They meant everything, Nathan said quietly. Every single one. I was trying to find ways to stay connected to you, to make sure you knew you were important to me, even when I couldn't say it directly. And the good morning messages? I wanted to be the first voice you heard each day, Nathan admitted. Even if it was just through text, I wanted to be part of your routine, part of your life in a way that felt essential. Eric felt his heart clench with affection. You are. I started looking forward to those messages more than anything else in my day. Good, Nathan said, pressing a kiss to Eric's chest. Because I'm not planning to stop sending them anytime soon. Promise? Promise, Nathan said, tilting his head up to look at Eric. I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life, wanting to share it with you. The declaration was simple but profound, carrying the weight of a future Eric had barely dared to imagine. He cupped Nathan's face in his hands, marveling at the fact that he was allowed to touch him this way now that this beautiful, complicated, wonderful person loved him back. I love you, Eric said, the words feeling both familiar and brand new. I love you too, Nathan replied, leaning into Eric's touch. So much it scares me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared? Good scared, Nathan said without hesitation. The kind of scared that means something really matters. They fell asleep on the couch that night, wrapped around each other in a tangle of limbs and contentment. Eric woke up several times during the night just to reassure himself that this was real, that Nathan was really there in his arms, that this wasn't just another dream he'd have to wake up from. 3 weeks later, Eric woke up to the familiar buzz of his phone, but instead of reaching for it immediately, he turned to look at Nathan, who was still asleep beside him in Eric's bed. Nathan's face was peaceful in the morning light, his hair mussed from sleep, and Eric felt the same rush of affection and disbelief that had become his new normal. His phone buzzed again, and Eric finally reached for it, smiling when he saw Nathan's name on the screen. Good morning, beautiful. I know you're probably still asleep next to me, but I wanted to send this anyway because I love knowing you'll see it when you wake up. Eric looked over at Nathan, who was now awake and grinning at him sheepishly. You sent me a good morning text while lying in bed next to me? Eric asked, laughing. I didn't want to break tradition, Nathan said, reaching over to pull Eric closer. Plus, I like the way you smile when you read my messages. You're ridiculous, Eric said, but he was smiling as he said it. Ridiculously in love with you, Nathan corrected, pressing a kiss to Eric's temple. Eric's phone buzzed again, and he looked down to see another message from Nathan. Good morning again. I love you. Have I mentioned that lately? You mentioned it about 30 seconds ago, Eric said, showing Nathan the screen. Well, it bears repeating, Nathan said, completely unrepentant. I spent so many months not being able to say it that I'm making up for lost time. Eric set his phone aside and turned to face Nathan fully, taking in the easy happiness on his face. The way Nathan looked completely at home in Eric's bed, in Eric's life. No regrets? Eric asked, a question that had become part of their morning routine over the past few weeks. None, Nathan said firmly, the same answer he gave every time Eric asked. You? Not a single one, Eric replied, leaning in to kiss Nathan softly. Their relationship had settled into a rhythm that felt both new and completely natural. Nathan had officially moved in the week before, though he'd been spending most nights at Eric's place since their first conversation 3 weeks ago. They'd navigated the practical aspects of combining their lives with surprising ease, but it was the emotional intimacy that continued to amaze Eric. Nathan was affectionate in ways Eric had never expected, constantly touching him in small ways, holding his hand while they watched movies, pressing kisses to his shoulder while Eric cooked dinner, wrapping his arms around Eric from behind while Eric brushed his teeth. It was as if Nathan was making up for all the months of careful distance, claiming his right to be close to Eric in every possible way. The text messages had evolved too. Instead of the careful coded messages they'd sent before, Nathan now sent Eric streams of consciousness throughout the day, photos of things that reminded him of Eric, random declarations of love, complaints about work meetings, and observations about everything from the weather to the book he was reading. Eric's favorite messages were still the goodnight ones, though. They were different now. Instead of the careful, meaningful messages Nathan used to send, they were simpler, more domestic. Can't wait to come home to you. Bringing dinner, hope you like Thai food. Running late, but I'll be there soon. It was the casual assumption of Eric's presence in Nathan's life that meant the most. The way Nathan now planned his days around coming home to Eric. The way he automatically included Eric in every decision and future plan. I have a confession, Nathan said now, tracing patterns on Eric's chest with his fingertip. Oh? I've been keeping a list on my phone of all the things I want to do with you, places I want to take you, experiences I want us to have together. That's not embarrassing at all, Eric teased, but his heart felt warm at the admission. Want to see it? Nathan asked, reaching for his phone. Absolutely. Nathan pulled up a note on his phone and handed it to Eric, who scrolled through a list that was both comprehensive and surprisingly romantic. Weekend trips to small towns they'd never visited. Restaurants Nathan wanted to try with Eric. Movies he wanted to watch curled up together on the couch. Books he wanted to read aloud to Eric. Hiking trails he thought Eric would enjoy. Nathan, Eric said, his voice soft with emotion. This is beautiful. I kept adding to it every time I thought of something I wanted to share with you, Nathan explained. I guess I was planning our life together before I even knew that's what I was doing. Eric scrolled to the bottom of the list, where the most recent entries were more specific and immediate. Learn to make Eric's favorite breakfast. Find out what kind of flowers Eric likes. Plan surprise date for our 1-month anniversary. Our 1-month anniversary? Eric asked, looking up at Nathan with raised eyebrows. Nathan blushed slightly. I marked the date of our first conversation about this, when we finally admitted how we felt. Is that too cheesy? It's perfect, Eric said, leaning over to kiss Nathan thoroughly. Everything about this is perfect. Even the part where I sent you good morning texts for months without realizing I was basically courting you? Especially that part, Eric confirmed. Though I have to admit, I knew exactly what you were doing, even if you didn't. Really? Really? No straight guy sends his male best friend good morning and good night texts every single day for 3 months unless he's falling in love. Nathan laughed, shaking his head. I was so oblivious. You were figuring yourself out, Eric corrected gently. There's a difference. I'm still figuring myself out, Nathan admitted. But I'm sure about this, about us. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Eric felt his chest tighten with affection, still sometimes overwhelmed by the reality of Nathan's love, by the fact that this beautiful, thoughtful person had chosen him. I love you, Eric said, the words feeling both familiar and miraculous. I love you too, Nathan replied, settling back into Eric's arms. And I'm going to keep telling you that every morning and every night for as long as you'll let me. Forever then, Eric said, pressing a kiss to the top of Nathan's head. Forever, Nathan agreed, his voice muffled against Eric's chest. Eric's phone buzzed again, and he reached for it automatically, expecting another message from Nathan despite the fact that Nathan was literally in his arms. Instead, it was a message from his sister, Victoria Allen. Saw Nathan's Instagram post about you two. So happy for you both. When do I get to officially meet my brother-in-law? Eric showed the message to Nathan, who grinned widely. Brother-in-law? Nathan asked. I like the sound of that. Don't get ahead of yourself, Eric said, but he was smiling as he said it. Too late, Nathan said, pressing a kiss to Eric's jaw. I'm already planning our wedding. It's going to be beautiful. I'm thinking something small and intimate. Maybe in that park where we had our first real date. Our first real date? The day trip to the coast, Nathan clarified. That was when I knew for sure that I was completely gone for you. The way you looked in the sunset, the way you held my hand in the car, the way everything felt so natural and right between us. Eric remembered that day with perfect clarity, the way Nathan had seemed different somehow, more focused and intentional, the way the entire day had felt charged with possibility. I thought I was imagining things, Eric admitted. I kept telling myself it was just a friendly day out, that I was reading too much into everything. You weren't imagining anything, Nathan said firmly. I was falling in love with you in real time, and I was too scared to admit it, even to myself. And now? Now I can't imagine being scared of this, Nathan said, gesturing between them. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Eric felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, overwhelmed by the sincerity in Nathan's voice. by the reality of having everything he dreamed of for so long. "Don't cry," Nathan said softly, wiping away a tear that had escaped down Eric's cheek. "Happy tears?" "The happiest," Eric confirmed. "I just never thought I could have this, have you?" "You have me," Nathan said, his voice fierce with certainty. "Completely. Forever. I'm not going anywhere." They lay in comfortable silence for a while, both of them processing the magnitude of how their lives had changed, how a simple pattern of text messages had led them to this moment of complete happiness and contentment. Eric's phone buzzed again, and this time it was actually a work email reminding him that the outside world still existed beyond the bubble of happiness he and Nathan had created. "I should probably get ready for work," Eric said reluctantly. "5 more minutes," Nathan said, tightening his arms around Eric. "I want to memorize this moment." "We have every morning for the rest of our lives," Eric pointed out. "I know," Nathan said, "but this is our first official morning as people who know exactly how much we love each other, and I want to remember it perfectly." Eric settled back into Nathan's arms, deciding that work could wait a few more minutes. Nathan was right. This was a moment worth memorizing, worth savoring. "Nathan," Eric said after a few minutes of peaceful silence. "Hmm? Thank you for texting me first." Nathan lifted his head to look at Eric, confusion clear on his face. "What do you mean?" "You always texted me first," Eric explained. "Good morning, good night, random thoughts throughout the day. You were always the one reaching out, making the connection, keeping us close even when we couldn't acknowledge what that closeness meant." Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering Eric's words. "I think I needed to," he said finally. "I think some part of me knew that if I didn't keep reaching for you, I might lose you, and that was unacceptable." "You were never going to lose me," Eric said softly. "I know that now," Nathan said, "but I'm glad I didn't take that chance." Eric's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Nathan that had clearly been sent before Nathan had spoken. "I love you. Have I mentioned that this morning?" Eric showed Nathan the screen, laughing. "When did you send this?" "While you were talking," Nathan admitted sheepishly. "I told you, I'm making up for lost time." "You're ridiculous," Eric said, but his heart felt full to bursting with affection. "Ridiculously in love with you," Nathan corrected, just like he had earlier. Eric kissed Nathan thoroughly, pouring all of his love and gratitude and joy into the connection between them. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Nathan rested his forehead against Eric's. "Okay," Nathan said, his voice slightly breathless. "Now I'm ready to let you go to work." "Good," Eric said, "because I really do need to get ready." "But you're coming straight home afterward, right?" Nathan asked, and Eric could hear the slight vulnerability in his voice, the part of Nathan that was still adjusting to being allowed to expect Eric's presence in his life. "Free at home, Shepard," Eric confirmed. "To you." "To me," Nathan repeated, smiling like the words were a gift. As Eric got ready for work, Nathan made coffee and breakfast, moving around Eric's kitchen like he'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. Eric watched him from the doorway, marveling at how natural it felt to have Nathan in his space, in his life, in his morning routine. "What?" Nathan asked, noticing Eric staring. "Just thinking about how this is my life now," Eric said. "How I get to come home to you every day, how I get to wake up next to you every morning." "Is that okay?" Nathan asked. And Eric could hear the genuine question in his voice, the part of Nathan that was still sometimes surprised that Eric wanted this as much as he did. "It's more than okay," Eric said, crossing the kitchen to wrap his arms around Nathan from behind. "It's everything I ever wanted." Nathan leaned back against Eric's chest, both of them taking a moment to absorb the simple pleasure of being close to each other. "I have to go," Eric said reluctantly, pressing a kiss to Nathan's neck. "I know," Nathan said, turning in Eric's arms to face him. "I'll see you tonight." "You'll see me tonight," Eric confirmed, kissing Nathan softly. As Eric gathered his things and headed for the door, his phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. "Have a good day at work. I love you. I'll be thinking about you." Eric looked back at Nathan, who was grinning at him from the kitchen. "You sent that while I was still here?" Eric asked. "I wanted to make sure you had something to smile about on your way to work," Nathan explained. Eric felt his heart clench with affection, overwhelmed by Nathan's thoughtfulness. By the way, Nathan had made taking care of Eric's happiness a priority. I love you, Eric said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. I love you too, Nathan replied. Now go to work so you can come home to me later. Eric left for work with Nathan's laughter following him out the door, his phone already buzzing with another message. Actually, I love you. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Eric smiled as he read the message, typing back quickly. Crystal clear. I love you too. The response came immediately. Good. Have I mentioned that you're perfect? Once or twice, Eric typed back. Well, it bears repeating. Eric put his phone away as he reached his car, but it buzzed again before he could start the engine. Okay, I'll stop texting you now so you can drive safely. But I love you. Eric laughed out loud, typing back one final message. I love you too. See you tonight. The response was immediate and made Eric's chest warm with happiness. Can't wait. As Eric drove to work, he thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. All those months of careful communication, of Nathan reaching out first and saying goodnight last, of both of them dancing around feelings they were too scared to name. All those text messages that had felt loaded with meaning because they were loaded with meaning, because Nathan had been falling in love with him in real time and finding ways to stay connected even when he couldn't acknowledge what that connection meant. Eric thought about the night Nathan had finally admitted his feelings, the way his voice had shaken with vulnerability and hope. He thought about their first kiss, soft and tentative and then urgent and certain. He thought about the way Nathan looked at him now, with complete openness and affection, no longer hiding behind the careful boundaries of friendship. Most of all, Eric thought about the future they were building together, one good morning text and goodnight message at a time. Nathan had kept his promise about not stopping those messages, but they were different now, simpler and more domestic and somehow even more meaningful because they came with the assumption of presence, the certainty that they were building a life together. Eric's phone buzzed as he pulled into the parking lot at work, and he smiled before even looking at the message, knowing it would be from Nathan. I know I said I'd stop texting you, but I lied. I love you. Have a good day. Eric typed back quickly before heading into the office. I love you too. Thank you for texting me first. The response came as Eric was walking through the lobby. Thank you for texting me back. Always. Eric put his phone away, smiling as he headed to his desk. His coworkers had gotten used to his improved mood over the past few weeks, the way he smiled at his phone throughout the day, the way he seemed lighter and happier than they'd ever seen him. At lunch, Eric's phone lit up with a photo from Nathan, a picture of the book Nathan was reading with a message attached. This character reminds me of you, smart and kind and completely lovable. Eric typed back, you're biased. Completely, came the immediate response, and I'm not sorry about it. Throughout the afternoon, the messages continued. Random observations about Nathan's day, photos of things that reminded him of Eric, questions about dinner plans, and regular declarations of love that never failed to make Eric smile. At 5 o'clock, Eric's phone buzzed with a message that made him laugh out loud. Is it time for you to come home yet? I miss you. Eric typed back, on my way now. Good, I love you. I love you too. See you in 20 minutes. I'll be waiting. As Eric drove home, he reflected on how perfectly Nathan had kept his unconscious promise from months ago. Nathan had wanted to be part of Eric's morning and evening routines, had wanted to be essential to Eric's daily life, and he had achieved that in the most beautiful way possible. Every morning, Eric woke up to Nathan's presence, either physically beside him or through those sweet, simple, good morning messages. Every evening, Eric came home to Nathan's warmth and affection, to the certainty that he was loved and wanted and appreciated. Nathan had been texting him first and saying goodnight last for months, without realizing the significance of those actions, without understanding that he was essentially courting Eric, claiming space in Eric's daily life and routine. And now that they were together officially and completely, Nathan continued those patterns because they had become natural expressions of his love and commitment. Eric pulled into his driveway and sat in his car for a moment, looking at the lights in his apartment windows, knowing that Nathan was inside waiting for him, and his phone buzzed one final time. I can see you sitting in the car. Come inside so I can kiss you hello properly. Eric looked up at the window and saw Nathan's silhouette, saw him wave when he noticed Eric looking. Eric waved back, his heart full to bursting with happiness and love and gratitude for the man who had been brave enough to text him first, patient enough to text him last, and loving enough to build a bridge between friendship and forever. Eric got out of his car and headed inside, where Nathan was waiting by the door with a smile that could power the entire city. "Hi," Nathan said softly, reaching for Eric immediately. "Hi," Eric replied, stepping into Nathan's arms and feeling the familiar sense of coming home. "How was your day?" Nathan asked, pressing a soft kiss to Eric's lips. "Better now," Eric said, meaning it completely. "Good answer," Nathan said, smiling against Eric's lips. "I love you." "I love you too," Eric replied, marveling at how easy it was to say now, how natural it felt to express the feelings he'd been hiding for so long. As they settled onto the couch together, Nathan's head on Eric's chest and Eric's fingers running through Nathan's hair, Eric's phone buzzed with one final message of the day. "Good night, Eric. Even though you're right here with me, I wanted to send this because I love our tradition and I love you." Eric showed Nathan the message, laughing softly. "You sent me a goodnight text while lying on top of me?" "I didn't want to break tradition," Nathan said, echoing his words from that morning. "Plus, I like knowing that tomorrow you'll wake up and see a message from me, even if I'm right there beside you." "You're ridiculous," Eric said, but his voice was full of affection. "Ridiculously in love with you," Nathan corrected, pressing a kiss to Eric's chest. Eric typed back a response to Nathan's goodnight message, even though Nathan was literally in his arms. "Good night, Nathan. I love you too. Thank you for always texting me first and saying goodnight last." Nathan's phone buzzed with the message, and he smiled as he read it. "Thank you for always texting me back." "Always," Eric promised, pressing a kiss to the top of Nathan's head. And as they settled into sleep that night, both of them knew that tomorrow would bring more messages, more small declarations of love, more ways of staying connected throughout the day. Nathan would continue to text Eric first and say goodnight last, not because he was unconsciously courting him anymore, but because those simple acts of communication had become expressions of their love, ways of claiming space in each other's lives and hearts. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories began with the simplest gestures, with good morning texts and goodnight messages, with someone brave enough to reach out first and patient enough to wait for the other person to understand what those gestures meant. Sometimes love announced itself not with grand proclamations, but with consistent presence, with the daily choice to connect and communicate and care. Eric and Nathan had found their way to each other through text messages and late-night conversations, through months of careful navigation and patient hope. They had built their love on a foundation of friendship and understanding, and now they were building their future on the same principles that had brought them together in the first place. Every morning, Nathan would wake up wanting to share his day with Eric. Every evening, Eric would come home to Nathan's warmth and affection. And in between, they would text each other constantly, sharing thoughts and observations and declarations of love, maintaining the connection that had started as unconscious courtship and evolved into conscious commitment. They were exactly where they needed to be, and they had gotten there one text message at a time.